How we doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, riding solo. What time is it? It's kind of late. Wanted to really go over what I saw in tonight's Dallas Cowboys game. One of the better entertaining games that I've seen this year. It's a little uncomfortable to say this, but it's the truth. Thanks to CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks, I'm likely going back-to-back in Pops, Cheddar, and the Sun League. That league means a little bit more to me because it's named after my late father. So, although they are a rival of ours, I must admit, two of my Dallas Cowboys players came through for me. One was drafted in Lamb, one was picked up late in the year in Cooks. Part of my motivation behind that was because Jamar Chase is a game time decision, and I was not in a position to wait and see what was going to happen with him tomorrow. Curtis Samuel will be my other receiver tomorrow, another NFC East rival. But it worked out so far. I don't like to count my chickens before they're hatched, but it looks like I am going back-to-back in that league. But tonight's show, we're going to be highlighting the big night in Dallas, which also saw the immortalization of former legendary Cowboys coach and one of the anchors at Fox Sports, Mr. Jimmy Johnson. We got some MLB moves. Frankie Montes is now a Cincinnati Red, and former Red Sox Chris Sale now headed to a former Boston team in the Atlanta Braves. We got R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly heading to Canada for some defensive prowess. Anytime Thibodeau team always emphasizes defense. I'm also going to hit on who should go number one in the draft and what the top 5 teams that are currently in those draft positions should be doing. I'm going to give my final thought on why I believe the NCAA got it right with Florida State. And I'm also going to talk about Jimmy Johnson's legacy and why in the head coaching realm and the history of the NFL, he is one of the truly greatest what-ifs. We're going to start it in Big D. We're going to end it in Big D. Big night in Big D. The Cowboys win a thriller with some controversy. Jimmy Johnson has his day, and leaving points on the board makes the Lions pay. Lots to unpack here. This was a hell of a game. The Detroit Lions, led by former Giant and Cowboy Mr. Dan Campbell, fearless. They go for it on fourth down more frequently than any other team in the National Football League. And I got to say, you live by it and you die by it. But I do believe that in the end, Detroit's overzealous nature actually cost them the football game. Earlier in the game, when it was only 7-3, Detroit opted to go for it on fourth down, as opposed to taking a very makeable, easy chip shot field goal. Towards the end of the game, the Lions were in a position to tie. They chose to go for 2. On the first 2-point attempt, there was a confusion between number 70 and number 68, both members of the Lions O-line. And number 68 reported as an eligible receiver, but the referee apparently didn't hear him. And I understand both sides of the argument because when you're reporting as an offensive lineman, you kind of want to do it secretively because you don't want the defense to hone in on you. And while I've been very critical of the referees all season long, I do believe that in that instance, that was on the player. You got to make sure that you are heard. Dallas used to house 100,000. I think the population in that stadium is a little less now. But the point is, loud, you're in the end zone, you're the road team. You got to make sure you get heard. And honestly, if they would have took 3, they would have never had to go for 2. The touchdown would have won them the game. Just a real bizarre game. CeeDee Lamb becomes the single season receiving leader for the Dallas Cowboys. And number 88 is a very iconic number for that organization. You're talking about Drew Pearson. You're talking about the playmaker, Michael Irvin. You're talking about more recently Dez Bryant in the Tony Romo era. And now you have CeeDee Lamb in the Dak Prescott era. But the connection between Lamb and Prescott tonight was pretty much unstoppable. and kind of shows a weakness that I have spoken on previous shows with the Detroit Lions. While I think the Detroit Lions are heading into better things in their immediate future, they have to fix their defense. Their defense plays hard, but they have a propensity for getting cooked when they go against some of the better wide receivers in this league. And while you have a phenomenal player on the front line in Aiden Hutchinson, I believe that secondary and the linebackers lead for a lot of leakage. And the Dallas Cowboys throw the ball a lot. And today was the perfect opportunity to do so. I think Jared Goff played a good game in defeat. A weakness that I see with the Dallas Cowboys moving forward is they are still struggling stopping the run. And that could be a legitimate problem for them in the playoffs, whether they win the East or whether they're a wild card and end up traveling to play the winner of the NFC South, whether it's New Orleans, whether it's Tampa. That's going to be hemmed out tomorrow, possibly, or going into Week 18. But this was a strange game. You know, CeeDee Lamb, as remarkable of a game as he had, 227 yards, just went bananas in this game. He would have had another touchdown were it not for lazily putting the ball out. I understand what he was trying to do. He was trying to break the end zone with the ball. But when you're holding it like a loaf of bread and you're going at that speed, it's very easy to lose it. The ball ended up bouncing out for a touchback. I believe on a lot of metrics, when you look at offensively what the Dallas Cowboys did, it's hard to believe that they only put up 20 points when you have a performance like that from your number one receiver. Brandon Cooks, very clutch in the fourth quarter. I think Jared Goff showed a lot of resolve on that final drive. And while I like the aggressiveness of Coach Campbell, when your offensive lineman didn't properly report, or at least the referee didn't think so, you convert, then it gets overturned. You go for it again. Micah Parsons is in the neutral zone. You throw a pick. The pick gets negated. At that point, I think I'm taking the point. Go to overtime. See what happens. You know, I mean, it was that kind of weird game. Detroit ran a totally genius fake punt earlier in the game. This game had a little bit of everything. The thing that sucks for Detroit is that they could have applied pressure on the Philadelphia Eagles for that 2 seed. And with the Eagles playing the lowly Cardinals later today, it's Sunday morning now, it's very unlikely. Dallas needed to win this game. And just kind of fast forwarding to give you the temperature of what's happening in the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles fighting for the East crown. And in my opinion, the most realistic scenario is the winner of that division will get the 2 seed. I don't believe that either one of them are going to catch the Niners because of the common game where the Niners beat them both head up. It would take the Niners to lose to the Rams and a couple of other things going down. But this is my honest opinion. I do think the Cowboys have the inside track to win this division because in the event that they end up with the same record, the Dallas Cowboys have a better conference record than the Eagles by virtue of a potential Eagles loss in the next 2 weeks. It's not going to be tomorrow. But when I consider that the New York Giants gave the Philadelphia Eagles all they could handle in Philadelphia, and they only played Tyrod Taylor for half that game, I do believe in Jersey, it could be a different result. Now, I know some Giant fans don't want to even know about that or think about that because right now we're in the number 5 spot to draft. But that's one of those things where it's like you want to stick it to your division rivals. So I encourage the Giants to go out in there and try to win the game. I mean, that's what they play for anyway. As this game goes moving forward, it was entertaining, very entertaining. But when I look at the playoff layout, a very intriguing potential round 1 matchup could be the Detroit Lions hosting the Los Angeles Rams. Rams are one of the hottest teams in football right now. Their Giants are going to have a tall task beating them at home tomorrow. But what I love about this matchup is that Matthew Stafford makes his return back to Detroit. He was a great quarterback there for many years. Didn't do a lot of winning, though. Put up some great stats. He played on some shoddy teams. He did have the great Calvin Johnson, but he could only take them so far with everything organizationally that was happening. A couple of seasons ago, Jared Goff, who helped the Rams win the NFC, but not the Super Bowl, gets traded for Stafford. Stafford wins the Super Bowl. It would be very interesting if that happens. Stafford going back to Detroit. I want to flip it to Jimmy Johnson for a moment. I'm going to hit hard on him towards the end of the show. But I want to say this. I absolutely loved his speech. And no, I don't like the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a diehard Giants fan. And as a young man, when I started following the New York Giants, we played the Cowboys in a very iconic game in the 1993 season, which I always kind of identified as a changing of the guard kind of situation, where you had the legendary Lawrence Taylor, Phil Simms, an aging Giants team that was led at that time by Dan Reeves. You had a couple of guys relocated from Denver to New York, core guys that were Dan Reeves guys. At the time, the Dallas Cowboys were already a world champion and were starting to ascend into a dynasty. And I think it was kind of like the Giants' last stand of what they built in the 80s as well as the early 90s. They won 2 Super Bowls, 86 and 90 during that era. And one of the more iconic football games I've ever seen, seeing Lawrence Taylor, Emmitt Smith going at it, Emmitt's just will to win, it was a heartbreaking game for me as a young dude, but it kind of set the tone for a decade or so later, decade and a half later, when the Giants played them down the road, Romo, Eli era, richness of the rivalry. But the first taste of Giants Cowboys for me as a young man, when it really mattered, both teams relevant, Cowboys got us. They won 3 out of 4, and they were the dynasty prior to the New England Patriots and the dynasty after the San Francisco 49ers. But Jimmy Johnson helped them win those first 2 Super Bowls. And there was a lot of controversy that led to Jimmy leaving way early. Barry Switzer inherited Jimmy Johnson's team, and they defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 3rd Super Bowl title in that decade, their 5th overall. They have not been to a Super Bowl since then. And they actually haven't been past the 2nd round since that game. That's also the day that my baby sister was born. So I always kid around and say, my baby sister being born, the Cowboys haven't done nothing since that day. My baby sister grew up to be a Packer fan. As many of you know that watch my show, my late father was a Packer fan. I'm first generation Giants. I made that decision for myself as a young man watching the 1990 Giants. Shouts out Mark Bavaro, Stephen Baker, Mark Ingram, William Roberts, Phil Simms, Jeff Hostetler, O.J. Anderson, Rodney Hampton. That's the first Giants team that I sunk into, and it also happened to be when I first started playing organized football. So my Pee Wee games got out at an hour where I was always able to watch the Giants. So it was pretty cool learning the game of football. We made a championship game that year in my Pee Wee team, but watching the Giants and the 49er dynasty, and essentially Leonard Marshall's iconic hit on Joe Montana ended Joe Montana's 49er career, basically. He later recouped and had a second act in Kansas City. Going to come back to football in a little bit, but want to hit on some MLB moves that have gone down today. Frankie Montes is now a Cincinnati Red, 1 year, $16 million. Chris Sale to the Braves for Vaughn Grissom and cash. I'm going to start with Montes. Similar to Sonny Gray, who relocated to Cincy after his Yankee stint, maybe it works out good for Montes like that, and maybe he can reclaim his career. He was one of the more ascending pitchers, kind of like for a bad A's team. They had one good year, but for the most part, they were terrible. They're going to be in Vegas soon. Facilities are way below standard, just a bad organization right now, but maybe going to Vegas will kind of be the shot in the arm they need to elevate that organization. About a year and a half ago, New York Yankees at the trade deadline went out and got Frankie Montes. At the time, it looked like a good move. Montes was kind of damaged goods. He was injured. J.P. Sears was included in that deal. Montes, his time with the Yankees, he was just never right. Unfortunately, he was just never right. And, he barely played this past year. He joined the rotation late in the year. And the point is, Brian Cashman got this one wrong. It was a horrible trade. I hope for Frankie Montez's sake, he's able to reclaim his career in Cincinnati. Yankees are definitely in need of some pitching, though, because that Juan Soto deal sent some pitchers out to San Diego. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Yankees have a reunion with Jordan Montgomery. They definitely could use another lefty. And they also need some bullpen help with the departure of Michael King in that deal. Chris Sale is an Atlanta Brave. This is a very intriguing move. He has not done well the last 2-3 years because of all the injuries. Once upon a time, it seems like a real long time ago, he was one of the top pitchers in all of Major League Baseball when he was a Chicago White Sox and then coming over to the Boston Red Sox. It was a mixed bag in Boston, but too many injuries for Chris Sale. What I like about this trade for the Boston Red Sox is they get what I think could be a potential 5-tool player in Vaughn Grissom. This guy's super versatile, and there's a lot that he brings to the table. And I think a team that's kind of in rebuild mode like the Boston Red Sox, you got to get young talent. You got to filter that into your team, into your franchise. So I think for the Boston Red Sox, our rivals, it's a quality move. As Chris Sale goes, going to a team that's only a couple of years removed from being the world champions. Last 2 postseasons ended cruelly against the Philadelphia Phillies team that neither season won that division but beat the Braves in the playoffs. Atlanta Braves is still a phenomenal team led by Ronald Acuna Jr., but this rotation gets better if Sale still has something in the tank. You've got Strider. You've got Morton. You've got Max Fried. And now you have a guy like Chris Sale, who as a number 4 starter could really inject some serious leadership into that rotation. In order for this to happen, Chris Sale had to waive his no trade clause. And I like the move for the Atlanta Braves. I know that there's a lot of hype coming out of Los Angeles with the move that the Dodgers made, or the moves, getting Yamamoto as well as the main prize, Shohei Ohtani. But I don't have the highest opinion of David Roberts as a manager. And this has nothing to do with him altering the fate of the 04 New York Yankees, the only team in Major League Baseball to blow a 3-0 lead. As a manager, I'm sorry, dude. Just a pandemic World Series when you have limitless resources and all-star at every position damn near, I'm not convinced that getting these 2 sensational Japanese players and adding them to a team that already features guys like Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts guarantees you anything. The Los Angeles Dodgers have to play as a team and get it done when it counts most in October, and consistently they have not been able to do that. I love Shohei Ohtani. I think he's great for the game of baseball, a phenomenal ambassador. And in the end, he might go down as one of the greatest to ever do it. But he has never contributed to any team truly winning. This generation's Babe Ruth, I get it. Ruth pitched. Ruth was the home run king for a long time before Hank Aaron. But it's like, you got to win, dude. If you haven't won yet, I don't like those comparisons. Babe Ruth is like next level iconic. It's not no bias because I'm a Yankee fan. I'm just saying, sometimes these comparisons get thrown around too early. The contract that Shohei got, genius to avoid busting up the luxury tax, the way that he moved the money to the back. But as of right now, way too early prediction. Atlanta Braves are going to go to the World Series. I'm calling it now. I'm not going to talk about the American League yet. Baseball preview, we got a ways to go for that. I'm going to hit on my favorite basketball team, the New York Knicks. Quick, no longer a Knick. RJ returns home. RJ is originally from Canada. RJ Barrett, I'm referring to. I'm bummed about Emmanuel Quickly leaving the Knicks. He was our spark plug offensively off the bench, and a guy that I actually argued about that could have been a starter for this Knicks team. I believe that this was a sacrifice with Quick leaving because you needed to convince them to take RJ's contract. RJ Barrett, it's a mixed bag. Statistically, when you look at some of the metrics of what he's done since his tenure with New York, a lot of it to me is misleading. I think he's disappeared in a lot of big games. And in a lot of big games, he has been an enigma at the free throw line. Like certain things from an intelligence level, basketball acumen, I've always been a little questioned about it because I'm like, dude went to Duke. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm not bummed about seeing RJ go. I am very bummed about seeing IQ go, Emmanuel quickly. But this is what the Knicks get in return. OG Anunoby, Precious Achua, Malachi Flynn. Flynn is a 6'1 guard. What I like about what the Knicks are building here, I'm not going to lie, knee jerk, I wasn't pleased. But when I kind of read into the metrics of the trade, I feel a little more comfortable about it now. Any Tom Thibodeau team, first, foremost, and always preaches defense. Tom Thibodeau doesn't care if you could put the ball in the hoop. If you don't make a legitimate commitment to defense, he doesn't give you the minutes. When's the last time you've seen Evan Fournier really contribute? And and this is a man that set the Knicks 3-point field goal record a couple of years ago. One that was held down by one of the best and most popular Knicks of all time, Mr. John Starks. But what I like about what this does here is I believe that this gives the Knicks a little more physicality to bang with the Milwaukees and the Bostons and the Philadelphias. Jalen Brunson is a superstar. Julius Randle needs to play the two, in a perfect world, the three. There was also a part of me that when I looked at this trade, it kind of opened up my third eye to say, wait a minute, is this possibly opening the door for the Knicks to make a move for maybe a Donovan Mitchell? I can't answer that right now. Time will tell. Of course, you have to see how it goes when you grade who won a trade. And the only way you could grade who won a trade is by letting time go by and letting the players get with their new teams. It takes time to evaluate a trade. So right now, I'm not sure. But the potential is there for the Knicks to become a better team right here. When I originally saw this, I wasn't sharing my enthusiasm that I am now. All right. We obviously are gearing up towards the NFL playoffs, and we have a lot to look forward to. But for some fans whose teams didn't make the playoffs, what you look forward to right now is draft positioning. I want to hit on the top 5 teams picking in this year's NFL draft. Who should go number 1? The Chicago Bears, via the Carolina Panthers, have the number 1 draft pick, as well as likely another top 10 pick. Justin Fields has had a good second half of the year. He plays the quarterback position. But a lot of mock drafts have quarterbacks linked to the Bears. I think it's interesting. Because when I consider the weapons that they have on offense, an emerging Cole Kmet at tight end, DJ Moore, a very good season all in all, I believe that if you put that kind of stock in Justin Fields not too long ago, I think he's earned the right to stay your starter. It's not Caleb Williams right now. It's not Drake May. I think Justin Fields needs to keep that job in Chicago. And if I'm the Chicago Bears, I'd go out and get Marvin Harrison Jr., who could be the heir apparent to what DJ Moore is. And in time, he might be the best receiver on that team. If I'm the Chicago Bears, I'm going out and getting Marvin Harrison Jr. What should the Cardinals do? This is interesting. I saw a mock draft scenario today on CBS Sports that suggests that the Arizona Cardinals take Drake May out of UNC and make a deal with the Minnesota Vikings that sends Kyler Murray over there. It's no secret that the Cardinals have been looking for a way out of dealing with Kyler Murray. And when you consider that the Minnesota Vikings have an aging and healing now because of the injury, Kirk Cousins, he's on limited time. And when you look at their current quarterback situation, Josh Dobbs got demoted. Nick Mullins took the job. Now he got demoted. Now Hall's getting an opportunity in an integral, important, pivotal game against division rival Green Bay. I think it goes without saying that the Vikings are going to be in the market for a quarterback. And this trade with the Cardinals could make some sense because Kyler Murray is still very young. but he's definitely not the man that Jonathan Gannon wants. This is interesting now. The Washington Commanders are linked to Jaden Daniels out of LSU, in my opinion, possibly the best quarterback in this draft. I think he's the total package. But the thing that sometimes could be misleading when you get these guys at schools like the LSUs is that they are surrounded by five-star athletes. But I try to be fair and say at the same time, you're also getting it done against five-star athletes. It's no secret that the SEC is the standard for college football. Jaden Daniels to the Washington Commanders makes sense on a lot of levels. Riverboat Ron's likely out. I have a feeling Bieniemy is going to take over the head coaching job. However, Bill Belichick could fit into Washington. It could even be via a trade. The Patriots might be looking to deal Bill. It's a very ever-moving, complex situation. Because the thing with Bill Belichick is that I don't think it's a matter of coaching. I think the Patriots don't want him to be the GM anymore. But when you've been there for 2 decades and you've given that organization 6 Super Bowls, I don't think you're going to take too kindly to being demoted on any level. And I also think on some metrics, Bill might want a new challenge. I'm sure for the Patriots, they would be happy to have him coach in the NFC. I've also considered that the Chicago Bears could be a destination. But with their second half, I believe that their coach earns the right to hang around. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. But, it's weird because Sam Howell out of UNC, this is his first year as coming into the year as the full-time starter. He first appeared last season. Roughly about 7 weeks ago, he was actually leading the NFC in passing yards. But this is a team that doesn't have a good O-line. In fact, in my opinion, they have the worst O-line in professional football. He's taken a beating. He wasn't supposed to start this week. But with his backup, Jacoby Brissett, getting injured in practice, Howell is back in, going against the 49ers, which I don't envy him one bit. 49ers are going to be coming pissed off after their primetime defeat to the AFC best Baltimore Ravens and what some people saw as a Super Bowl preview. New England Patriots, what should they do? Once again, quarterback is not a bad idea for the Patriots either. Do they go for another Michigan man? I think it would be awfully hard to imagine McCarthy going that high. But, the last time they drafted a dude from Michigan, it paid dividends and it worked out rather well. If Harrison doesn't go to the Bears early, I could see New England pulling the trigger and bringing in Harrison. When I think about what does New England need, I think they need more love on the offensive side of the ball because defensively, you're going to have Christian Gonzalez coming back. You're going to have a healthy Matthew Judon. I believe that the Patriots' 2 biggest needs right now, wide receiver 1 and a starting quarterback, because it's not Mac Jones. And while I think Bailey Zappi has done an admirable job, I'm not convinced he's a starter. I do think he's a quality backup next year if New England gets the right guy. And there are plenty of quarterbacks to choose from right now. Lastly, what should the New York Giants do? I know that there is a huge contingency amongst Giant fans that want to go out and get Jaden Daniels. I envision this a little differently. There are a plethora of right tackles or guys that could be converted to right tackle that I think the Giants should strongly consider. In previous years, the Giants have spent a decent amount of draft capital at the tackle positions or just offensive line in general that have not panned out. Andrew Thomas is the exception. I think John Michael Schmitz, while it's been a mixed bag of a rookie year, I think he was the right pick, and I think he's going to be a quality football player. And I've said it on previous shows. Those are the only 2 New York Giants currently on the offensive line that should be reinvited back to be starters. Evan Neal's season was cut short. He had a shitty season to begin with. But I do have one guy in mind. There's more than one guy. But this is the guy I want. I want Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. Now, granted, he's on the left, but I know he could convert to the right. Opposite Andrew Thomas, push Evan Neal inside. Evan Neal was a guard in college, folks. I think Evan Neal could convert better to guard and kind of salvage his NFL career. Now, in round 2, the Giants have 2 picks. It goes without saying that Azeez Ojulari is injured too much. And while I still think he could be part of the future plan, If you look at Giants football and know about how history is cyclical, the Giants have done it when they've had a rotation of pass rushers, whether it was Michael Strahan, OCU Manura, Justin Tuck, whether it was Justin Tuck, OCU Manura, Jason Pierre-Paul on our most recent Super Bowl runs. That three-headed monster of edge rushers has always paid dividends for the New York Football Giants. And you also have to take into consideration, if Wink Martindale doesn't return, do the Giants go back to a 4-3? That is something to consider too, because that also weighs heavily on what the value of Xavier McKinney is. Because if the Giants go back to a 4-3, X might not be in the Giants' plans. If we stay with a 3-4, I think X gets franchised. It's going to be very interesting. But this is my answer for what the Giants need to do as a fan. In no particular order. I'm telling you what they need with their first 3 picks, which all happened in the first 2 rounds. Quarterback, because you can get out of Daniel Jones's deal after this year. Right tackle, edge rusher. I wouldn't cry if they get themselves a receiver opposite of Jalen Hyatt. I've been frustrated with Jalen Hyatt's usage this year. I expected them to use him a lot more. Time will tell. I think Jalen Hyatt has all the tools to be a phenomenal receiver, but the Giants have to develop him. Gonna hit you on 2 of my final thoughts before I get out of here. Why the NCAA committee got it right with Florida State. It's a touchy one because when you only have 4 teams that qualify for the BCS Bowl Championship Series, some teams that are quality are going to get left out. But when I revisit Florida State's schedule versus what the SEC has dealt with and other powerhouse teams, revisiting the SEC championship, Georgia, who was attempting to go for a 3-peat, got beat by their hated rival, Alabama. If Bama would have gotten beaten, I think Florida State would have snuck in, but it might have screwed Texas. Next year, you're going to 12 teams in this thing. That's timesing it by 3. So there's going to be less controversy about this stuff. It might also lead to other bowl games getting shortened or getting kicked away. Having said all that, when you get tattooed the way that FSU got tattooed today, it goes without saying that Georgia not only should have been one of the top 4. I'm just going to say what I think. Georgia lost a game to Alabama. They lost the SEC championship, and with teams with other sexy records, they were on the outside looking in. Georgia is a 2-time defending champion, and they have that blemish. But they put it on FSU and shut up anybody that said that FSU belonged. This is not an indictment of the year that FSU had, but I am a Notre Dame fan. And I would like to remind people that way back in 1993, before the Bowl Championship Series even existed, one of my favorite New York Knicks, Charlie Ward, gave up football, became an NBA player, and was a rather successful point guard for the New York Knicks. He was the Heisman Trophy winner of the 93 season. Second to last week of college football's regular season, they lost a classic game to the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. It was really exciting getting to talk to Florida State and 49er great William Floyd here on the show, kind of revisiting the great battle that game was. A week later, Florida State wins their finale, and a Tom Coughlin-led Boston College team kicks Boston College to a victory over Notre Dame. That set up Florida State and Notre Dame as 1-2 with the 2 best records in the country. They went on to each win their respective bowl games. But this is what I took issue with back then. I understand that the legendary Coach Bowden never won a championship, and I'm happy that he did because I have nothing but admiration and respect for who Bobby Bowden was. But this is my thing. If Notre Dame beat you guys head up and you didn't play a rematch, how is it not a share? Because back in that era, you used to get a share of national titles occasionally when it was one of those scenarios. So fast forward all these years later, FSU getting left out. I'm not going to cry for them, but I do feel bad for the kids. And I would like to see what we're having now, a bigger pool to really play it out and prove it. But the Georgia Bulldogs proved that Florida State had a great year, but they did not belong on the same field with an SEC caliber team. And it's not an indictment on FSU. It's just reasserting the fact of how damn good the SEC really is. They are next level of college football. They are the standard. My next final thought and my last final thought for the evening, or the morning, I should say. The great coaching what if Jimmy Johnson. I started the show explaining how Jimmy Johnson helped the Cowboys become America's team again. They were 1-15 when he originally took that thing over. What really swayed the tide for the future of the Dallas Cowboys was making the trade for Herschel Walker that sent him to the Minnesota Vikings. They were able to get the triplets, Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith is the NFL's all-time leading rusher. Troy Aikman has 3 Super Bowl victories. There are only 2 men that have more Super Bowl victories at the quarterback position than Troy Aikman. Their names are Joe Montana and Tom Brady, 3, Terry Bradshaw. I do believe that the injury to Joe Montana, which derailed the 49er dynasty, helped expedite the Dallas dynasty. I would have loved to see Joe versus Troy. We got Young versus Troy, but those 49ers teams were different with Joe. No knock on Steve. He's a Hall of Famer in his own right, and he got the monkey off his back. But going back to that era of football, it would have been beautiful to see that. Back to Jimmy Johnson. A lot of big egos were on the table during that era of professional football. We also saw Emmitt Smith hold out during that year, back when running backs were paid the way they should be. It was a running league back then, and Emmitt was the heart and soul of that offense. Make no mistake about it. They had the best offensive line possibly ever. But Emmitt was that dude, because without Emmitt, they didn't win a game. He got paid. He made his point. Michael Irvin's career was cut short, but prior to it, one of the most dynamic wide receivers and played one of the best games against, in my opinion, the greatest corner to ever do it, Mr. Deion Sanders. It was in a losing effort the year that the 49ers won. But Jimmy Johnson went back-to-back. And then Jimmy was out. And it's pretty egregious when you think that a guy with that kind of success was out after winning too. There was a lot of controversy. Barry Switzer took that squad over, and in 95 with Jimmy's team, beat the Pittsburgh Steelers to complete a dynasty. But the greatest what if is this. Similar to when Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells left the Giants simultaneously, as well as Tom Coughlin, guys like Lawrence Taylor, guys like Pepper Johnson, guys like Carl Banks didn't have that same kind of motivation to play for other coaches. And I understand it. Those were the guys that brought them up and nurtured them into the players they were. I feel that in the Cowboys case, it was a little comparable and a little similar. Because when you lose the guys that are basically the identity of the driving force of what your product is, what your program is, what the star means in that case, it's like what this logo means, like when Joe Torre left, just putting it in perspective. I believe that sometimes bad habits take over. There's also father time. There's a lot of variables. But Barry Switzer inherited a great team that Jimmy Johnson essentially built. And if there's one thing that I would have loved to see happen today, not because I'm a Cowboy fan, but what's right is right. I really wish Jerry Jones would have just flat out said in front of the masses that were embracing Jimmy Johnson into this very iconic Cowboy Ring of Honor, that he was wrong. Just say in front of everybody, I messed up by letting you go. I think the Cowboys possibly would have had a dynasty comparable to what the guys behind me did. That was 07. They went undefeated. We know what happened. But those dudes won 6 Super Bowls. I believe the Dallas Cowboys in that era could have done even more, or if not similar to what they did, were it not for letting Jimmy Johnson go. Jimmy Johnson later went to the Miami Dolphins after Don Shula, but it wasn't the same kind of situation. And more times than not, when coaches relocate, it don't work out good with the second act. Sometimes it does. Guys like Bill Parcells, they were very adaptable. Parcells took the Patriots to a Super Bowl in defeat. He got the Dallas Cowboys close. He got the New York Jets close. Guys like Pete Carroll got 3 tries. You don't get 3 tries as a coach when you fail twice, but Pete Carroll maximized the third opportunity, and he took Seattle to 2 Super Bowls, winning one of them. But the point to be made is that it doesn't happen often. Guy like Dick Vermeil, later in his career, wins a Super Bowl after getting close with Philly. But the point I'm making is, usually with grand success, it's very hard to duplicate that in a second place. Mike Holmgren, he took over the GM duties. He took over Seattle. He got them close, but he didn't get it done. In Green Bay, he broke the 29-year hex, the 29-year drought. But in closing, I just want to say, as a rival, congratulations, Jimmy Johnson. Well done. Someone who I have a ton of respect for on the other side of the rivalry, and I'm so thankful that he wasn't able to recruit and take Michael Strahan. Michael Strahan was very close to being a Dallas Cowboy. It's funny how things work. I know a lot of Giant fans these days are like, damn it, we should have drafted Micah Parsons. Hate the draft, love the draft. The draft is coming up soon, folks. 1 day left in the new year. This is the last day of this year. And on a sense of reflection, I just want to say that it's been a trying year on some levels, but it's been a beautiful year. Most of all, we made it again. I just want to congratulate everybody a little bit in advance on a happy new year. And just continue to follow the things that you are passionate about, people. We only get one shot at this thing. And understand that if you didn't achieve every goal that you set out for this year, it doesn't define everything. Sometimes just keeping it together is something all unto itself. Not every day is a 10, and not every year is a 10. But we made it, folks. I want to sincerely thank all of you for always supporting this show, always showing me love, showing up in the comments, giving me ideas. I do this show not just for me. I do this show for y'all because I love doing this shit. Happy New Year, everybody. 2024, here we come. I'm Richie, and I'm out.